You haven't heard me speak yet, but it's good to be with you. John, thank you for the leadership of the Chamber and all of you for what you do. Providing jobs, leading your community, we appreciate that. It is going to be that it hurt, man. It hurt from a Badger perspective. Although I love the Buckeyes. In fact, Fickle, before I got crazy got politics, I was assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State. And Fickle actually wrestled for a couple matches, so we want to see Luke do well, a good wrestling guy, and that was obviously a big win for him. And I always tell this joke this time of year. You all know how many Buckeye fans it takes to put in a light bulb? You guys heard this one? It takes 5. 1 to screw it in, and 4 to talk about the '68 team. That's so true, and that's so true about those Buckeye fans. So no, it's been good to be with. Bob Gladys says hello. Bob's not here, of course. I haven't seen him, but he's doing a great job for you. You may get stuck with me, and the voters get to decide that here next year if they ever get these lines wrong. But Bob is obviously doing an outstanding job for you, and a super guy, a friend and colleague, as you know. And then I know Jeff Wagner and Sexy Rex Damschroeder back there. I serve with those guys in the State House, 2 super guys. Look, I'm going to just talk with John. I didn't know what he wanted. He said, so I'm just going to talk for about 5-10 minutes, maybe 12. I'll keep it short, and then we'll take a few minutes. You can ask questions. I tell every single group I talk to. Look, you all pay my salary. You're not stuck with me yet. You may be, but you still pay my salary. You're allowed to ask any question you want. You're allowed to yell at me. We have this amazing thing in America called the First Amendment, and you should exercise that. So normally you don't have to tell Americans too much about that. They know they have that right, and they're willing to do that. So let me just make a few comments. And first, let me start with this premise, because this is important. I think when you think about where we are today, it's important to start from this premise. It's still the greatest nation ever, and don't ever forget that fact. I mean, I've had the opportunity. Through the sport of wrestling, I traveled to what was then the Soviet Union. I've been to Cuba twice. And I tell folks, you go to places like that, you thank the good Lord you live here. I mean, I tell folks, I was in Moscow in February. In Moscow in February, it's like 400 below zero. I mean, you really thank the good Lord you live here. And the food was terrible. The people are great, but it shows you what's wrong when you have a command-type economy and that kind of system. What it does to people, what it does to initiative, what it does to commerce. Cuba is nothing more than, I tell folks, it's a warm Soviet Union. I was there in '88 and '90, and they were still driving at the time. They were still driving 59 Chevys before Castro. They're still, imagine that, 59 Chevys they're driving there. I tell people the best way to describe Cuba, it's Gilligan's Island with terrible food. That's what it reminded me of. So always start from the premise, because it's true. It's the greatest nation ever. But we may not be the greatest nation ever if we don't change some things. And let me just ask, how many are a little nervous about where we're headed right now? Yeah, about every hand goes up, and you're good company. 3 out of 4 Americans think we're on the wrong track. And the reason we're on the wrong track is because we're doing the wrong things in Washington. No ifs, ands, buts about it. We just simply are. I tell everyone this. The world's a dangerous place. It's a scary place. I mean, all you can do is watch the news any day of the week. But it's a better place, it's a safer place when the United States of America leads. And the truth is, you can't lead militarily, you can't lead diplomatically if you first don't lead economically. It's just the way it works. I mean, just the military superpower has to first be the economic superpower. It's just the way it works. And for a long time, that one entity has been the United States of America. And we want to make sure it stays that way. And this is why it's so important the politicians finally get it right for a change. The people always figure it out way before the politicians. You all know that. But I would argue right now, what we're doing in Washington, from an economic, and here's the other thing to keep in mind. You can't lead economically if you're not embracing the right kind of values. This is why it's important, this debate we're having in our culture over whose set of principles, whose set of values are going to prevail. It's important. And as leaders, we need to weigh in on this. We can't let certain folks say, oh, the free enterprise said that doesn't, the work ethic, that's not that important. Family, that can't. We got to weigh on that one too, because the right values build the right economic system which allows us to lead the world. And it's a better place when it's the United States of America with our principles, our values, and the foundation that we were built on. And I would argue right now, what's happening in Washington is we're doing everything wrong. You think about the 4 big things. You think about taxes, you think about regulation, you think about energy policy, you think about fiscal policy, we're doing them all wrong. How many want to throw out the tax code right now? I mean, seriously. You want to know why I'm not, you guys all know I'm one of the conservative guys, I'm in the Republican Party. But this is not meant to sound partisan. One of the reasons Herman Cain's doing so well is because he recognizes what Americans recognize. We're sick of the tax code. It's ridiculous. Any tax code that allows 47% of the American people not to pay the main tax, the income tax, is just wrong on a fundamental fairness level. And any tax code that allows, for whatever reason, General Electric not to pay corporate taxes the second quarter is just wrong on a fundamental fairness level. It needs to be thrown out. And whether you like his 999 plan or not, the fact that he says, get rid of the current code and let's start with something different, makes a lot of sense. The tax code is wrong. You've got to create a tax code that's conducive for economic growth so that what we just heard about with the Zollers can happen again. Where more and more people, and many of you have experienced that. It was a great story that we heard there, congratulations. But we want that to happen all over Ohio, all over the Midwest, all over the United States. We want that, and you can't when you've got this cumbersome, ridiculous tax code. When you can't grow your economy and remain the economic superpower when you got the wrong energy policy. And it's just real simple, just common sense energy. Just allow Americans to get the resources the good Lord has blessed us with, to bring them to market. You cannot be the economic leader if you don't have a readily available supply of energy at affordable cost. It is truly the foundation. If you don't have energy, you can't be the leading economy. Sometimes I think that's why the radical left is so against common sense energy policy, because they get that fundamental fact. We have to get it too. We have to make the case for why we need to use the resources that we've been blessed with. And then third, regulatory policy. Again, we don't even need to make the case to the American people. They get this. They understand that. More and more regulation is not conducive to creating jobs and growing our economy. We had a hearing, as John mentioned, I sit on the Oversight Committee. Early on this session, we had a hearing where we invited 5 small business owners from around the country to come in and testify. And we invited one from our district, from Minster, Ohio, Jack Busher, Busher Electric, super guy, been in business 25 years, great company, a leader in his community, just like all of you are in yours. And they all 5 witnesses did great, about a 3-hour hearing. Near the end of the hearing, freshman member, one of these new sharp freshmen who came in, a member from New Hampshire, asked the best question, the compelling question. He said to these 5 small business owners, he said, I just want to know one thing. And this was all about regulation and how government was making it difficult to compete in the world market and run their business. He said, I just want to know one thing. One simple question. If you knew now, if you knew then what you know now, would you have started? I mean, he just cut right. If you knew back then, all the hassles, all the hurdles, all the impediments government's going to put in your way, if you knew back then what you know today, would in fact you have started your business? Every single one of these guys said, wouldn't do it. Would not do it. Now, they've just been through 3 hours of congressional hearing. That had something to do with it, probably. But the fact is, think about that. If that's not the saddest commentary on the greatest nation in history, that 5 successful people who employ others, who grow and do things in their saying, I don't know if I'd do it all over again because of all the hassles. I have 2 buddies of mine, they're in manufacturing. They're good friends. One is his boys all wrestle with our boys. We've been good friends for a long time. Very successful. They have a business in Sydney, and Wapakoneta, and Dayton. And this is a few years ago, I was Bruce and Mike, and Mike's the more direct one, and we were talking, and Mike says to me, he says, Jim, you know what? He says, I love being in business, but I hate being an employer. And I hate being an employer because of all the stuff you guys make us do. I mean, he hates being an employer, not because he doesn't like people, he does. He wants, but all the hassles government makes him deal with. So we got to get the tax policy right, we got to get the energy policy right, we got to get the regulatory policy right, and I'll finish up here. We got to get the fiscal policy right. For goodness sake. Did you see the news today? We were meeting with some of the elected officials here earlier, and we talked about this. We're now at 1-to-1, $15 trillion debt, $15 trillion economy. Anytime you get to a 1-to-1 ratio, bad news. Greek's there, Ireland's there, Portugal's there. All the countries have trouble, sovereign debt crisis in Europe. We are now there, 1-to-1. Now the thing that's saving us is we're still the biggest kid on the block. But when you get to there, you lose at least 1.5% of growth a year, coupled with all these other bad things I just described that we're doing. That's why we got this 9% unemployment and this kind of stagnant economy that we're seeing out there. Think about this number. I won't bore you with a bunch of numbers, but this one, this always gets me. This year, the federal government will spend $235 billion in interest payments. Now, I know I met some bankers back here earlier. One had a couple of boys, one at West Point, and all. We talked. But you all know this. You're all in business. Tell me about interest rates right now. What are they like? Someone tell me what interest rates are like. Yeah, low, not just low. Like they can't go any lower, right? They're historic low. They're going to go up. So we're paying $235 billion in interest right now to service this $15 trillion debt. Within 10 years, think about this fact. Within 10 years, on the spending path we're on, and interest rates just go up modestly, we will go from spending $235 billion to spending more in interest than we currently spend on national defense. We will approach $1 trillion within 10 years. Which begs the obvious question, how do you sustain that? And the answer is you can't. It will collapse. And so this is as Admiral Mullen, the head of the Joint Chiefs, has said, this is the biggest threat to national security there is. Here's a military guy saying the biggest threat to national security is the debt and fiscal problems we're facing. So we have got to get a handle on this, and it goes back. It goes back to what I said earlier. To be the world's superpower in a military context, you have to first be the economic superpower. You can't be the economic superpower if you don't embrace the right kind of values, the values that made us great in the first place. And we got to keep that in mind. There are certain fundamental principles that are so important that truly, when you look at it all, what makes us great is those basic values. And I will stop here, and I know I've said that twice, but I mean it this time. Quick story, though. How many of you remember, I love sharing this story because it captures the values that make America special. How many remember the story of Scott O'Grady when he shot down over Bosnia? Remember that story? Made a movie of this guy's experience? Fascinating. What 29-year-old guy had to survive, hiding from the bad guys, using his training, was ultimately rescued, brought to safety. Mics were put in front of him just like this, at a podium. Press wanted to hear what this young man had to say. He said 3 things. I'm paraphrasing, but he said basically 3 things. He said, first of all, I want to thank God because it's a miracle I'm standing here today. He got the fundamental, this fact that faith has always been part of the American experience. The founders knew this, and we can never forget that. Second thing he said was this. He says, I want to, and I'm definitely paraphrasing, but he said something to this effect. He said, I want to thank my family. He said, because it was while I was out there that I thought about them. I knew they were thinking and praying for me. Knowing they were doing all that helped motivate me to do what I had to do to make it. He said, I really want to thank my family. And I thought, this guy's figured it out. The key, I tell folks a lot, the first institution the good Lord put together wasn't the church, wasn't the state, it was the family. And the strength of that institution ultimately determines the strength of our entire culture. Polly and I, as John mentioned, we have 4 kids. And one of the things, our kids are now 24, 22, 19, and 18. And one of the things we've learned over the years is the older they got, the more we appreciated our parents. It's sort of funny how that works, isn't it? You don't always appreciate your mom and dad when you're 18, but when you get a little older and have kids of your own, suddenly you're like, wow, they weren't so dumb after all, right? But Mark, do you ever remember Mark Twain's line? He said, Mark Twain said that, he talked about how his relationship with his dad evolved over time, and he said, when I was 10, my dad knew everything. When I was 20, he didn't know much of anything. And now that I'm 30, I'm surprised at how much he's learned in 10 years. That's kind of the way it works. But that family, and Frank, this is something, I think sometimes policymakers forget this. We should ask a fundamental question. Does it benefit families? Does it help moms and dads keep more of their money? Does it help them have more control of their kids' education? You ask those questions, you typically will arrive at the right answer when you're thinking about public policy. And it's so important. And then finally, when he referenced, the third thing that Scott O'Grady said was, I want to thank the guys who come to save me. They're the heroes. And I thought, you know what? When he referenced the military, when he referenced the guys who put their lives on the line to come save him, he was getting at the word we most associate with America, and that's freedom. I mean, because you think about our country, this is something unique to America. Militaries throughout most of history and in most countries stood for tyranny and oppression, but not in the United States of America. Our military has always represented freedom, and not just for Americans, but for countless number of people around the planet. And I thought, he said it, faith, family, and freedom. And so when we're thinking about doing the right things policy-wise in an economic sense, we also have to be willing to stand up and say there are certain values that undergird it all and make us the great nation that we are. And if we lose those, we won't be the greatest in the future, and our kids and our grandkids won't get to experience this wonderful experiment in freedom we call America. My coach in high school, super guy, passed away 2 years ago. He was the toughest teacher in our school. We taught chemistry and physics. And he was, I think, the toughest wrestling coach in the whole darn state. Super guy. One of these guys that every single kid in the school looked up to. He was just that kind of teacher, that kind of coach. And every day, and this is not an exaggeration, every single day he talked about discipline. He said, Jordan, you want to do well in my class? This is chemistry. This is not health class. This is chemistry class. You want to do well in my class? You better be disciplined about preparing. You better be disciplined about doing the reading the night before. You better be disciplined about participating in class. And in the wrestling room, oh my goodness. I can still remember, he said self-discipline. Self-discipline is the most important character quality necessary to accomplish anything of meaning or significance every day. Self-discipline. I'm like, but that guy, shut up. He's driving me crazy. Because he sounded just like my dad. You get enough at home, and you get it from your coach. But he had a great definition. It hangs in our wrestling room today. My brother's a coach at our high school. It hangs in the room, and it says, discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And you know what that meant? It meant doing it coach's way when you'd rather do it your way. Meant doing things the right way when you'd rather do them the convenient way. And it's the word that we most need in America today. It's always been there. That character quality has always been there. It was there in 1776. And every time it's been tough, it's been there. But it's what we need today if we're going to continue to be the greatest country in the world. And I know the folks in this room understand it. The people who were honored tonight understand it. But we all have to do our part. And the great thing about Americans is we've always been willing to get off the sidelines and get in the game. Never been content to hang out in the shadows, hang out in the twilight. We always have said we will step in the game and we will make a difference. And that's the kind of moment we face today. We truly do. And I'm confident we're all going to do that and make sure this country remains the greatest nation in history. Did I make the 10 minutes, John? Quiet?
You can have all that.
But I got time for a few questions if you want to fire away, and then I'll get out of your hair and let you finish up your evening. Your chance to yell at Congressman. I try to keep it under the time. I apologize. No one? Yes, sir.
Do you feel that that Herman Cain has peaked too soon, and if not, is he truly a viable candidate?
Look, I'm not an expert in presidential politics. I think he is a viable candidate. Obviously, he's near the top in the Republican primary with Republican primary voters. But you don't. Let's just be honest. You don't get you don't get either of the major parties' nomination by winning in a national poll. You get it by winning in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. So he's got to demonstrate an ability to put together an organization. But what's the old fundamentals of politics? To win a campaign, you need a good candidate, you need money, and you need a good organization. And we got a good candidate, obviously, in Mr. Cain. That's been demonstrated. But we'll see what he can do on the organization and the money side. My position is I'm for the Republican today, whoever that happens to be. I don't know if I'm going to endorse one of the individuals or not, but I think you can. And we're at a unique time in American politics. I mean, who thought you'd see what happened? We have had now 3 elections in a row where it was basically get rid of the people in control. You know, we said well, we're going to get rid of throughout the House Republicans and throughout the Republicans in Congress in 06. In 08, we said we're getting rid of the making sure that we're throwing out the Republican president. And then in 10, we shifted it back, and Republicans are back in control of the House. So the voters are like, we're fed up with you guys, and appropriately so. Appropriately so. We got to do a lot better, I think, in Washington. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Do you think there's any chance that the super committee can actually come to a proposal that can be accepted by both sides?
Good question. The Joint Select Committee, better known as the Super Committee, I have problems with it on a fundamental level. I mean, the Super Committee is supposed to be United States Congress, not supposed to be some 12 Super Committee. But we'll see. I mean, some days I'm like, there's no chance they're going to reach an agreement, and then other days I'm thinking there's a slim chance they're going to reach an agreement. We will see. My biggest concern, I'll be just honest with you, is that they'll want to raise taxes, and it is just absolutely the wrong thing to do. You do not look. The numbers are so bad. I gave you just a couple: the 15 to 1-to-1, and the interest payments and how they're going to go up. This year we spent $3.6 trillion. We only took in 2.3, so we're in a $1.3 trillion deficit, annual deficit. So the numbers are so bad. You cannot ultimately address the situation unless you have growth. You got to have a growing economy. You got to cut, but you can't cut your way out of this. You got to reduce spending and you got to grow. Raising taxes is not conducive to economic growth. Now, it's just a fact. So I'm nervous that they might go that direction. All right, I'll take one more, and then I'll be around for a few minutes if you want. Last chance. What? Yes, yes.
What is your opinion on gainful employment with the student loans and Department of Education?
I was never for the stinking government taking over all the student loans in the first place. This is just ridiculous. That they actually, how did they say? They actually talked about how it was going to save. When I debated this in the budget committee last term, and totally opposed to it. They actually talked about how this was going to save the taxpayers. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And tell me one thing, tell me, with the exception of the military, tell me one thing the federal government does well. You know, that all, where we guarantee we can take over this. And look at all the things that, for those of you in banking, look at all the HAMP program, the HARP program, all the home affordability modification plans, all these different programs. They never even helped the people they were designed to help. In fact, I would argue they made it worse for people who had their homes underwater and were in tough situations. I think they made it worse for them, and they gave them a false hope and everything else. So it doesn't work. It's back to this values thing. The market, as you all know, the market does it 1,000 times better than the government can. And we have now got into this unfortunate situation, which Wall Street Journal has called crony capitalism, where the government's picking winners and losers. They're picking, and most of the time they pick losers, like the Solyndra case, if you follow that, and a whole is bad. It just is. Let the market work. Let the market work. So I know this is an audience who gets that. So thank you all. God bless you. It's been great to be with you.